The Gospel of Mark that we just heard show us one of the miraculous actions that Jesus did at the beginning of his ministry, the calming of a sea storm. In the Bible, the calming of a storm is a characteristic sign of divine power, because the sea and the wind were seen as forces of evil and chaos, which only God could control. In fact, it is what was simply stipulated in the first reading, that God alone is the master of the sea. In the calming of the storm, the apostle witnesses a work that only God can accomplish, which means that Jesus has divine power. But at the same time, the miracle shows clearly Jesus' care for his apostle. In fact, Mark is using the story here for catechism purposes. The storm reflects the post-Easter experience of the early church. The disciples at that time have run into all sorts of difficulties and persecution, and they feel that the Lord has abandoned them. But through this story by the evangelist Mark, they were summoned to have faith in the presence of Jesus with them and in his care for them. But now, let us just try to imagine step by step what happened on that day. As Jesus and his apostle were crossing the lake, a storm blew up. At first, for a while, the apostles were managing by themselves. They were in control. It gave a very good feeling to be in control. We are running the show. Things are within our power, and the outcome is in our hands. In such circumstances, it is easy to convince ourselves that we have faith, great faith, but faith in ourselves, faith in our capacities. At that time, the problem is that we can be on an ego trip. The ego is happiest when in control of a familiar and predictable situation. Sometimes it can also mean controlling the life of others, which is a big mistake, which is an intrusion in the other people's life. But that evening, when the storm arose and the boat seems to be on the verge of sinking, the apostles suddenly discover that things were out of their control. To find ourselves out of control, as maybe we experience now in Hong Kong, is not a pleasing experience. We experience most serious cases of it in time of serious illness or in time of tragedy. At such times, everything seems to be falling apart. We feel confused and powerless. In fact, to find oneself in such a situation is both humbling and terrifying. But it is precisely also in time like this that we discover whether or not we have faith. Our first reaction maybe is to think that God no longer cares about us, then has abandoned us. That evening, when things got out of control for the apostle, it seems that the two fell like this. They looked towards Jesus only to discover that he was asleep. So they were filled of fear. But then their faith rose to the challenge. It was enough for them to awaken Jesus with their prayer and to have trust and faith in his presence for the storming of their fear to be still. Even though Jesus was with the apostle on that boat, the storm still struck. So, just because a storm strikes in our life, it does not mean that God has abandoned us. If we have faith, we will no doubt that He continues to be with us, and we will turn to Him in prayer, and we will feel His help. Brother and sister, this gospel story challenges us to trust in God's power, especially when storms assail us. When we have faith, as human beings, we can give up the need to be in control. What real faith does is to assure us that God is with us even in the midst of a big storm. It is the conviction that we are not alone which enables us to get through the storm. There is a story about a sea captain who, in his retirement, skipper a fishing boat, taking day trippers to some outlying island. One day, on one trip, the boat was full of young people. These young people laughed at the old captain when they saw him saying a prayer before setting out, because the day was fine and the sea was very calm. However, they were not long out at the sea when a storm suddenly blew up, and the boat began violently to move up and down as the wave rise and fall. The terrified young passenger came to the captain and asked him to join them in prayer. But the old man replied, "I said my prayer when it was calm. Now, when it is rough, I attend to my ship." Brother and sister, there is here a beautiful lesson for us. If we cannot or will not seek God in the quiet moment of our life, we are not likely to find Him when trouble strikes. We are most likely to panic. But if we have learned to seek Him and to trust Him in the quiet moment, then most certainly we will find Him when the going gets rough. It is true that many people turn to God only in time of extreme danger. For such people, God is just like a life belt, useful in time of crisis, but otherwise irrelevant. In dark, God is their only guarantor, but in the light, they say that they do not know Him. If our relationship with God is based on fear rather than on love, more likely that is what we will experience. But for other people, faith, in a sense of reliance on God, is just the air, the breath. It's just the bread they eat. It's just the path they walk. Brother and sister, since we celebrate today Father's Day, let us conclude with another story telling us which lesson an Indian father taught his son at the occasion of the Indian youth rite of passage to adulthood. The father took his son into a forest blindfolded and left him alone there. The son was required to sit on a stone, the part of the tree remaining of the ground after have been cut down, to sit there the whole night and not to take off the blindfold until the ray of the sun shines through it. Then the son will be all by himself, and he could not cry out for help to anyone. Once he survived the night, he will have become a man, an adult. But he cannot tell to the other boys about his experience. Each boy must come into his own manhood. The boy was terrified the whole night. He could hear all kind of noise. Wild beasts were all around him. The wind blew the grass and the earth to the point of shaking the stone on which he was sitting. But the son sat stoically, never removing the blindfold, because he knew it will be the only way he could become a man. Finally, after an horrific night, the sun appeared and the boy removed his blindfold. It was then that he saw his father sitting on a stoop just next to him, all watching the whole night. Brother and sister, Father's Day remind us, like that boy in the forest, that we are never truly alone, even in time of big storm. Our Father are always there. Even when we do not know it and when we do not feel it, the Lord, our family and friend, and especially our Father, are watching out for us, sitting quietly beside us so that we can perform well in our life. This is the reason why today we want in a special way to thank our Father and to ask God to bless them. So, happy Father's Day to you all, Father, and may God bless all of you. Amen.